der 29 November 1977.
Maybe before we start, like a bit of a personal question, how did you guys get involved in these type of things, like security, Iran? What brings a person to go this deep into this type of field?
When you live in a jungle, you have a natural interest in poisonous snakes.
Okay. And where did you start this natural interest? How did you come about to where you are, through the army?
I first started dealing with it as a young soldier in Israeli Air Force intelligence, but very soon afterwards I went to Tel Aviv University, and that's where I started my academic career.
Okay. Meir?
I was born in Iran, and I lived there till '87, and through the revolution, and also through the Iraqi war. And my passion for the subject comes from my father's job. He had a pharmacy in Tehran, and in the evening, all sorts of people, communists, monarchists, people who supported the revolution, people who were against it, would come and discuss politics. And that's where I developed the passion. And in England, I studied international relations, and this is now what I do for a living.
Okay. Yossi?
I've been a journalist all my adult life. I started covering intelligence and strategic issues, and out of that interest, a few years ago, probably a decade ago, I realized that Iran's nuclear program is becoming a major concern for Israeli strategic posture in the region. I started learning about the program. I went to the Vienna-based IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. I learned a great deal about its activities, and that's how I became involved in writing about Iran's nuclear program.
Okay. If we know you a bit better, if we start something that happened just yesterday, fourth round of sanctions were imposed on Iran. I'd like to hear a bit, maybe if you could help us understand better what those sanctions were, and if you think they have any influence on the regime there.
I would start with
explaining the sanctions, if you...
well, it is the fourth round of sanctions. The first three rounds were decided by the UN Security Council in December 2006. They were very weak. They targeted, the language is very, very ambiguous, and they targeted mainly individuals, organizations, and companies which have been affiliated with Iran's nuclear and missile program. They didn't have any teeth at all. They made life difficult for these individuals, these companies, these organizations, and overall made life slightly difficult for Iran, but they were very weak and didn't change Iran's position, mind, and policy. This fourth round is supposedly, seemingly more hard, but it's not really.
Could you explain what it actually says?
Well, it says that the language, once again, it's a very diplomatic language. The document is very long. It is adding to the target list more companies, more individuals, more organizations, including the Pasdaran, the Revolutionary Guards, and also Iran's national shipping lines. But in terms of how to impose the sanctions, the language is once again very weak, ambiguous, for example, and also against Iran's banking system. For example, it calls for the world banking system to be more alert on a vigilance for transactions of Iran's central bank and Iranian banks, which are related or suspected of being related to nuclear and missile activities. But it doesn't say how they should be more alert to it, what are their means to stop transactions, and even more importantly, how they would, they have the right to stop Iranian cargoes on sea and air, but how they would stop it, whether, let's say Oman or Egypt or Israel or America would see an Iranian boat and would embark upon it by force. It's not clear.
Okay, Meir, what do you think about the sanctions?
I think the biggest message that comes from these sanctions is that the international community, especially the Russians and the Chinese, no longer believe Iran's story that its nuclear program is for civilian purposes only. One of the reasons we have not had a new round of sanctions imposed against Iran since 2006 is because Tehran has been able to play Russia and China to say to them, look, there is no evidence, this is an American plot, this is a plot by Bush. Since then, there have been two major developments. One of them is that there's emerging evidence that Iran is hell-bent on developing a nuclear bomb. It's one of the strengthening evidence that was used was the secret dossier that was exposed in the IAEA. The IAEA was hiding it about Iran's plans to develop nuclear warheads. And the other development which has counted against Iran's interests is the election of Obama. Obama is no Bush. His multilateral diplomacy, the way he's been able to separate Russia and China away from Iran, for example, through the scrapping of the missile shield in Czech Republic, has worked against Iran's interests. His outreach has weakened the stature and the justification of the hardliners in Iran, because the anti-American sentiments is one of the final glues that's holding this regime together. And his rapprochement has made it more difficult for the regime to justify its anti-American policies. So when you put these two together, and we see now that the Chinese and the Russians have actually joined the American camp in imposing sanctions against Iran, it's going to be important. It's very notable. And the other issue is that I don't think the United Nations Resolution Councils micromanage things as to say this is exactly what would happen if you see such a ship, this is what you do. What they do is that they give the legal justification for other countries to stop Iranian ships, which is very important, because before there wasn't, the legal justification was not so strong. And this comes
Can you see somebody stopping an Iranian ship now?
Yes, I see the Americans doing it, and I see NATO doing it. And the most important thing is this. There's numerous reports coming out that Iran is running out of raw uranium. This is something you turn to yellow cake, and then you enrich it through a process. The Iranians are trying to find new supplies of raw uranium in countries such as Niger and Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa. They need their shipping to get that uranium to Iran. And now, with the world's eyes watching Iran shipping with more attention and force, I think the Iranians are going to find it harder to supply that. And that's just one aspect of the sanctions, which I think come definitely at the wrong time for Iran's leadership.
Okay, Dan, what do you think about what we just talked about, the Obama duality? On one hand, Obama going into power makes America weaker. On the other hand, it makes the regime there less opposed, because they don't really have anything to oppose to.
I don't see the other hand. If I look at the overall picture, I see the weakness of the United States. And if you look at the broader picture, you see also what happened in North Korea. And basically, I don't think the Iranians have a dilemma. I don't think they have a dilemma. If to continue to develop their military nuclear program, they will do it. They may have minor difficulties here and there, but if you look at the overall picture, they are going ahead with their military nuclear program. And they realize that once they become nuclear, or even there is a perception that they're about to become nuclear, their situation will change in a very major way. So I see particularly the weakness of the United States, beyond the question of the present sanctions. I see the weakness